So good morning, everyone. My name is Sam Hoggett, and I'm the Chancellor here at UCSF, now going into my 9th year. And it's just a pleasure to see everyone in person, and I know we're live streaming this event. So good morning or good afternoon to those who are watching us remotely. I'm delighted to be here with you this morning in person to moderate a conversation with two of our extraordinary researchers about their contribution to the New York Times bestseller, The 7 Days series by Penguin Random House. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Elissa Epel, a pioneer in the science of stress and how it can lead to accelerated biologic aging. I hate it whenever I hear Elissa talk and tell me that, because it must mean I'm aging at twice the normal rate. Elissa is a professor and vice chair of adult psychology in the UCSF Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. She is also the co-director of the UCSF Aging, Metabolism and Emotion Center. She is the co-author of The Telomere Effect, a best-selling book about healthy aging that she co-wrote with Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn, Nobel laureate from UCSF. Her latest book that we're going to talk a little bit about today is Stress Prescription, 7 Days to More Joy and Ease. Dr. Aric Prather is a professor also in the UCSF Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. He is a co-director also of the UCSF Aging, Metabolism and Emotion Center. So obviously Elissa and Aric work closely together, and you'll see their two specialties closely interrelated. Aric is a licensed clinical psychologist. He has helped hundreds of patients improve their sleep using cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And his latest book is The Sleep Prescription, 7 Days Unlocking Your Best Rest. I'm told that in the post-weekend event, we'll be sending out an email wrapping up some of the things that happened, and in that email will be a QR code that you can use to get discounted copies of their book. I'm not sure whether I have to declare some conflict there, but they're both a great read. So I'll now start off with our conversation. And perhaps I'll start by posing the same question to both of you, and Elissa can lead off. And that is, in addition to the kind of therapeutic recommendations that you each have around stress and sleep, you are fundamental researchers in both topics. So I thought we'd start by giving the audience a sense of what the biology of stress and the biology of sleep is. One of the things I've learned from Elissa is that stress is not all bad. There's some good aspects to it from a biologic perspective, and then Aric can explain to us why we sleep, what happens when we sleep. So, Elissa?
Yes, thank you so much, Sam, for the lovely introduction. Aric and I have been studying the basic science of sleep and stress, how they affect health and aging for decades. I can say decades in my case, almost decades. For Aric.
Over a decade.
And we were just absolutely compelled to get extremely practical in these books for people that came out. I want to say post-pandemic, but I'll just say at whatever stage we're at now, they recently came out. But really, our daily lives are really characterized by our obsession at understanding the physiological and molecular mechanisms of the links between our lifestyle, stress, sleep, and aging. So let me give you the bad news that you already know, and then we'll go into the good news. The bad news is that chronic stress is our evolutionary biology that we're so gifted with is not geared for prolonged chronic stress, and especially the way we're so good at keeping it alive. The most common type of stress is our thoughts. So something might happen, we carry it with us. We carry it to sleep. We wake up with it. And that is wearing. We call it toxic stress when it's so chronic and we don't have the resources and the breaks. And what we know about the biology is that chronic stress and aging biology are best friends, that they're many intersecting pathways. Chronic stress accelerates aging at a cellular level. And Elizabeth Blackburn and I got to talk to Sam and some of you about 6 years ago about our early discoveries on understanding chronic stress and the acceleration of telomere attrition and telomere damage at the cellular level, this basic mechanism that Elizabeth Blackburn and her colleagues discovered.
Elissa, do you want to just say, for those who may not know, what a telomere is?
Yes, absolutely. So the telomere, Liz likes to explain them as the protective caps at the ends of our chromosomes, kind of like the protective caps at the ends of our shoelaces that prevent them from raveling. The telomere protects the chromosomes. Aging is about damage to our genes, and the telomeres are one of our frontline protectors of that type of damage. And naturally, they shorten with age, and when they get too short, our cells cannot divide and proliferate and replenish tissue. So we want sturdy telomeres, we want to take good care of them, and we know that our daily habits add up over years to protect them well, or to lead them to accelerated shortening and aging. And so in our study that was now over 15 years ago, we showed that chronic stress was associated with greater stress processes, oxidative stress, and damping down on the telomerase enzyme that Liz discovered, which protects telomeres and shortens telomeres early in life. And now we can look into the cell and know that for every aging mechanism that we can study in populations, meaning we've gotten to the point where we can measure it well in a high throughput way, we know that chronic stress is accelerating aging. So that includes our epigenetics, promoting an accelerated epigenetic clock. It damps down on our mitochondrial enzymes, so we can all kind of sit back and think, that means energy. No wonder we're so exhausted post-pandemic. It also promotes excessive systemic inflammation, pro-inflammatory cytokines, not from an acute response. We need that protective stress response, but a chronic elevation or leakiness of our cells toward a pro-inflammatory state, which of course creates brain aging and other types of organ aging. So it's become a top priority for NIH to understand how we can intervene here, how we can slow down the stress process and in a population health way promote a longer health span when we're living without disease and a shorter disease span. I didn't get to the good news, but we'll get to that.
We'll get back there, yeah. So Aric, I think we all understand we need sleep. If you go too long, you get incredibly tired and you have to sleep. But I think it's been a relative mystery until recently what actually happens during sleep from a biologic perspective, and why is it so important?
Yeah, there's unfortunately, unlike stress, there isn't the good news of it's not enough sleep. There's all these positive benefits. It turns out that sleep is such a fundamental kind of embedded in our biology, this kind of biological need to sleep, and it has so many functions. I think one of the challenges around sleep research has been this idea that, like, what is that single thing that we sleep for? But it turns out we sleep for lots of things, right? And so, sleeping is not kind of like a computer, like on-off, right? We don't just like close our eyes and shut down for the night. It's incredibly active and cycles throughout the night, right? So we kind of move down deeper into sleep, into, it's non-REM sleep and REM sleep are the two bins. And then within non-REM sleep, there are 3 phases of that go from not particularly interesting, but N1, 2, and 3. And it's in that N3 part where we get deep restorative sleep that we think is so fundamental to restoration in our body. So people have been really interested in kind of what happens during that time. But then also REM sleep has these incredible benefits. That's the time in which we do most of our dreaming. The phase that we go throughout the night, last about 90 minutes. We kind of cycle in and out. We have lots of awakenings during the night that we don't really recognize, and that's completely normal. Unfortunately, it increases as we get older, as does kind of the less deep sleep that we get, which is part of the reason that we wonder about the role of sleep in aging, because we're losing some of that deep sleep over time. People get less sleep over time as well, and again, that's normative, but we don't understand exactly if that's just part of the norm as our brain ages that we get less sleep, or is it something that we can intervene upon? And so there's the active research in that domain. This deep sleep piece happens more in the first half of the night, and the second half of the night is more characterized by this dreaming sleep, which is why if you're going to remember a dream, it's more likely that you woke up kind of in the early morning hours, right? Because it's just probability is you'll be in that phase to be able to think about that. But the downstream effects of sleep and the biology and the role it plays in kind of promoting or protecting us against disease is multifaceted. Our blood pressure drops throughout the night, right? So people that don't do that may have kind of be at risk for cardiovascular events. There's a circadian phase to our lives, right? So not just the amount of sleep we get, but kind of the ebbs and flows of hormones and blood pressure and all these other things that happen that contribute to this as well. But probably what Sam was mentioning was getting at is kind of one of the things that we recognize, probably the biggest discovery in human sleep science in the last 10 years has been the role of sleep in the brain. There's been growing epidemiologic evidence to suggest that people who don't get enough sleep are at increased risk for neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's. And so we've been kind of looking for what is that mechanism? How does that happen? And so now about 5 years ago or so, what was discovered was that when we sleep, the ventricles in our brain kind of increase such that more cerebral spinal fluid can flow into the brain and kind of bathe it and wash away things into what they also discovered is called the glymphatic system, which is kind of a way of getting waste out of the brain, all right? And so it turns out when people are asleep, more fluid can get in and wash out kind of the metabolites that grow and build up throughout kind of our waking day. And one of the metabolites that seems to be washed away and is so important is beta amyloid. So you may have heard of beta amyloid as kind of one of the kind of evil children that contribute to plaques that build up in the brain that are associated with Alzheimer's disease. And so we're beginning to kind of chip away at that, and that seems to be one of the key things that's important. But that being said, obviously there are lots of other things that sleep does. So in our lab, one of the things that we study a lot is the role of stress or sleep on the immune system. And so we know that sleep is important for vaccination response. It's important for kind of limiting or regulating inflammation. And so there's so many other aspects, not to mention how we feel and our ability to cope with stress, our emotion regulation, all of the psychiatric conditions that we know co-occur so frequently among people who have insufficient amounts of sleep or things that I treat clinically, specifically insomnia.
That's great. I should have said at the beginning that we'll leave time at the end for questions from you all. So be thinking about what are the questions you'd like to ask our two experts here. Elissa, you hinted in your opening comments that chronic stress is bad for us. How do we define that? And in the book, what I found a particularly useful analogy was your use of colors. And,
Yeah.
to get into the blue zone that I don't think I've been in for the last 9 years. But
All of us missing it.
could you just talk about sort of how you're not in a state of chronic stress and what should be your goal? And we'll come back to the acute stress story in a minute.
Yes. I'm sighing because we all have so many good examples of chronic stress in our life, working in healthcare during, in general, tremendous burnout and exhaustion during the pandemic. Of course, that was amplified, and we haven't had a full recovery period. And so our nervous systems are still a little bit upregulated. Now, let me give you examples of chronic stress. We think of it as situations that go on for years. And so caregiving, work demands that are way out of whack with how much control and resources you have, chronic financial strain, relationship conflict, things that are day in, day out stressful, and they're built into your life. And many of these you can't change. Having a chronic illness, having a loved one with a chronic illness. So rather than just think, okay, I've got all these chronically stressful situations, my telomeres are withering, and I'm on this, fast aging path. What is so fascinating and always surprising, even 20, 30 years into this, is the variability between people. Some of us are so resilient and good at not carrying around stress in our mind, but actually recovering from whatever stressful event it was, or turning off when nothing's happening that's stressful. The question for you is, what are you carrying? Are you still thinking about the situation, past or future? Are you trying to problem solve? We're so tied to wanting to solve things that even when it's a unsolvable, uncontrollable situation, we still work at it, even at an unconscious level. So there are ways to live with chronic stress where we can surf the waves. We can surf the events, and we can turn off our stress response and restore when we're not acutely dealing with it. There's acute stressors that happen within a day. We all have daily stressors, and I'm just going to say, no problem. Like, our body really knows how to recover from those. Our mind less so, but we can do better with a little bit of awareness and training. Now, one of the ways that I have framed all of this knowledge about trying to understand this animal body that we have that is so good at responding to stress, how is it that we get stuck in a stress response? Because zebras don't, and they don't, as Robert Sapolsky says, they don't get ulcers, because once the stressor's over, they're back to baseline. But we're not so good at that. So the way that I've kind of packaged all this information in trying to understand the body's nervous system and the mind's response is that we have these mind states that go from hot red stress state, red mind, to yellow mind, nothing's happening, but we might be carrying stress. Check in with your body, your hands, your face, your shoulders. Are you at a true state of relaxation right now? Most of us aren't. We're carrying a lot right now. So that's one of the tips, is going from yellow mind, where we don't need to be having a high sympathetic activity, to green mind, true relaxation. And that is characterized by when we are really, our attention is fully engaged in restorative or pleasant activities or hobbies, flow state, when we're focusing on something that there's enjoyment in unitasking. Then there's the last state that Sam is missing, and most of us are, which is blue mind, deep rest states. The state when you're awake and alert, but you're not trying to control anything. You're passive, and you're sending safety signals to your cells. And there's no mystery about that. Those are mind-body practices, and not narrowly defined. Any practices that are things like, that are allowing us to intentionally and consciously engage in a contemplative practice. Yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, meditation, massage, nature. And those are the narrow, Western ones we package, but there are really many different things we can do that let us have a break during waking life. I have studied retreats, and it's been so fascinating. I have this vision, this image in my brain that I'll never get rid of how, and it's in our publication, how much our genes switched from fighting immune invaders and fighting stress, all of those hundreds of proteins that we create, to shut those off and to go into restorative and rejuvenative mode, turning on the proteins that code for telomerase, mitochondria, growth factors. That's what we saw for people on a 1-week meditation retreat. We don't need a week, though. We just need to condition our body to short periods for these daily rest states.
Yeah, that's great. And Aric, you treat people with severe sleep disorders, insomnia, but all of us, I think, struggle at different times with sleep. And I was interested that you began the book with what you call getting the basics right. And before we get into the more complicated issues of sleep disorders and what we can do about it, could you just talk a little bit about what are those basics that every single person in this room should be aware of and that help not just people with severe disorder, but most of us?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I want to get in that blue state because that sounds
Good.
I mean,
Yeah,
I don't.
feels better than worrying.
I'd be happy with the green state. I'll be honest. But it's you know, it's a great example of it's related. This is why I've gotten into this. Is you know, stress and sleep are so interrelated, right? Like but often stress researchers they focus just on the daytime, and sleep researchers just focus on the nighttime. And this is why this is it's been such a great experience that we can do both. But when we think about our sleep, we're kind of built to sleep, right? It's something that we never think about how it works until it stops, right? And then we become hyper-focused on how to get sleep back on track, something that you never thought about. It just happens because it's so fundamental to our survival. Sleep is something that in every species that's ever been studied does something that looks like sleep, right? That restoration that we need. And we have lots of tips in, say, our clinic on how to get that working back on track, something that you get back into the mode of not thinking about it, just believing that it's going to happen. But there are like these necessary components, these basics, that if you don't have that on board, anything that I would tell you isn't going to work, right? So, our body needs kind of certain things kind of checked off the list, or sleep is just not going to. They're going to be credible barriers, and so I won't spend a lot of time on this because it's things most people know, but it's where you start, right? So there are substances that can affect our sleep, right? Alcohol. Alcohol is great at helping people get to sleep. Yeah, we'll get to caffeine. That's probably that's one that we all probably struggle with, the most common drug in the U.S. But alcohol suppresses REM sleep. It ends up helping people fall asleep, but then you get kind of a big dose of deep sleep, and it ends up you get this REM rebound that fragments your sleep and makes you feel kind of less restored, right? Like you get a lot of awakenings. Caffeine is a critical one. So caffeine's half-life, meaning how long it has to be in your system to be only half the concentration, is about 6 hours, right? So if you have a double espresso at 4 p.m., at 10 p.m., you still have that single espresso in your system, right? So no surprise that can keep you up. We metabolize it differently, but on average, it seems to impact people. And the reason it does so is because we have this sleep drive that builds up throughout the day. We call it the homeostatic sleep drive. I think of it kind of like a balloon that fills up with sleepiness throughout the day, all right? And then when it gets to its optimal amount, you feel sleepy, you go to sleep, and it drains out that sleepiness again. The neurochemical that we think is at least partly responsible for this is the buildup of adenosine in the brain, right? So adenosine is a byproduct of energy, of ATP. We all get back to our biochemistry courses. And adenosine builds up. So caffeine's chemical structure is very similar to adenosine and actually competes with the adenosine receptors in the brain. And so it blocks that experience of feeling sleepy, which is why you kind of maintain alertness despite the fact that this sleep balloon is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So there's these substances. But then, of course, it's your sleep environment, right? I mean, the body does better when it's dark. It does better when it's quiet. It does better when it's cool. We say, around a temperature around 67 degrees Fahrenheit is a good sweet spot, or like from 65 to maybe 68. So on the cooler side. And partly that's because your body temperature has to drop throughout the night, right? Your core body temperature drops, and so this can help facilitate that. And so, as you can imagine, what this can create are disparities in sleep opportunity, because not everybody can live in an environment where it can be cool, right? There's great research that's coming out around climate change and sleep, because as areas are heating, it's making it harder for people to sleep. And so this has been seen on a global level. It's really interesting and important work that's going on. But also, not everyone gets to live in a place that is free of noise, right? Or free of light pollution. And we know that there are kind of rampant socioeconomic and racial disparities in sleep. And a lot of it is potentially due to the stressors that we carry. And our group is doing a lot of research on that, but also kind of the environment. That really is at the basic foundational level of like allowing people to get the sleep they need.
Great. Melissa, let's turn to the good part of stress. And since I read your book, I told you every morning now after my hot shower, I take a cold shower for as long as I can stand it. So why?
I'm impressed.
Even the chancellor.
Why did I do that after reading your book?
Yeah, I can't wait till Wim Hof hears this.
Oh my God.
Has anyone here heard of Wim Hof? Okay, it's kind of a millennial phenomenon going around, but you should be aware of it because it's super relevant to us, midlife and older, in terms of helping, I will say, theoretically slowing aging. We're studying this method that we think can slow aging, and I won't say that we have shown that, but I will say there's a lot of promise in these short-term repeated stressors of the body, like cold. We've known about, let me just back up and say, engaging in stress is a critical part of life. That's how we grow and learn. And there's even studies showing lack of exposure is related to faster brain aging, worse cognition. We do these daily diary studies, and when you find a group that doesn't report any daily stressors, they look worse, not better, in their aging. So we want moderate stress, manageable stress. We want to be engaging. And in fact, one study took an elderly retired sample and had them engage in tutoring in these low-income schools and examined how it affected their health. And the hippocampal volume of the men actually increased over the year. It was stressful for them. They coming out from retirement and engaging in areas that were dangerous and children who didn't have all their needs met. But their meaning and purpose and generativity that they felt is the juice, is what the growth experience was for their stress. Okay, sorry, for their stress-related slowing of aging. Now, let's talk about bodily stress, because that's really concrete and maybe even easier and equally important as psychological stress. We know we want to approach psychological stress with a positive challenge response. We recover better, no harm done, and we think that even is healthy. But let's talk about Sam's question about physical stress of the body. We call this hormetic stress. Hormetic stress is an extremely well mapped out pathway, conserved pathway from cells to lower organisms to humans. And it simply means that during and after stress, we have turned on repair and restoration mechanisms. The cellular level, we know these molecular pathways, and these cells that get the repeated bursts of hot or cold live longer. Same with worms. So there's these longevity mechanisms from repeatedly stimulating the acute stress response. What does that look like in humans? Like, we need to know. This is this natural rejuvenance that we have, that we can unleash. We don't have an anti-aging pill yet, but we do have hormetic stress. So it looks like any type of stressor has some common mechanisms. They all have some differences as well, but hot, cold, and the extreme breathing that we've been studying are two examples. And the third example of hormetic stress is one you all know, but we probably don't do enough, and that is high-intensity aerobics. And So we've been studying the blips, the 7 minutes of high-intensity interval training, because that's a beautiful model for hormetic stress. Turn on the stress response, turn it off. You've created a huge stress response, and then the recovery. We think the vagal tone goes up, the reparative mechanisms are turned on. So in our studies so far, we find that when we compare these known methods of like slow breathing and mindfulness, they really do help with stress and depression and the nervous system attunement. We're finding that exercise and the extreme breathing and cold is equally effective for emotional well-being, for reducing depressive symptoms. These are just these 3-week experiments we've been doing throughout COVID, and so we don't have any. I'm giving you a preview of what we're working on to publish. What's happening during cold? We're creating a short-term stress response. And if we pair that, I think of it as stress fitness. We're exercising the nervous system. And if we can go into it with a positive attitude, that's where I struggle with the cold, of like, this is good for me, relax into it, then we're not also turning on the psychological stress response, and it's even better. How are you doing on that one, Sam?
Cold shower is pretty simple. When I read your extreme breathing, I thought, I'll put that off for a little bit. Can you just say a little bit about it?
Yeah. Well, let's try it.
What it means?
Next year, when we're together, we could try it in an early morning. I only do it early morning because it's so alerting and arousing. You just feel this tremendous energy. The breathing protocol we're testing is a cyclical hyperventilation and breath retention, or a hypoxia. And I will say that this is a traditional breathing practice in many traditions, particularly Eastern. But Wim Hof is a Dutchman who has made it popular. He's developed his own protocol. It's pretty brilliant. It's just 4 cycles of 30 breaths or so of hyperventilation with the mouth open. Feels terrible. But then you hold your breath for a minute or two, and there's stillness. And then you, if you do that 3 or 4 times, you may feel elation. I mean, we have altered our state of consciousness. We have changed a lot of probably, endorphins and growth factors acutely in the brain. So there's studies on this so far too, showing that it reduces the pro-inflammatory response to endotoxin. And we've got cells in our freezer that we need to write 1 more grant in order to do the proteomics, like really look at every 6,000 proteins in the body and what's happening during. I'm looking at Aric because he's got the exact numbers.
I'm not going to correct you if it's wrong. It's probably right.
What's happening when people are doing really slow breathing, relaxing? We know that does beautiful things to the nervous system and emotions, versus what's happening during this acute, intensive breathing.
Great. One of the things that I liked in your book, Aric, is that you acknowledge that you can't just turn worry off. We all worry about things, but you introduced me to this concept of worry early.
Yeah.
So what's that about?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's about being kind of intentional. So one of the challenges with people have problems falling asleep or staying asleep is, when we wake up or when we're trying to get sleep, it's not like our mind is filled with all the best things that happen in our life. It's not like we're like reliving these amazing moments. It's the worries about what's going to happen tomorrow, or kind of what should have gone differently, or something that like happened a long time ago that you're kind of replaying, this rumination. And that's a natural experience, but we think that we can kind of get out in front of it. And one way that we do this is by something called scheduled worry, right? And it may seem a little silly, right? Like you have to kind of give it a shot. But basically, the protocol, and this is what's used in many insomnia clinics around the world, is you kind of put in your schedule time where you just sit and worry, right? And you can do it in lots of different ways. You can write it out. You can journal, right? You can just think about it. You can talk it out. But what that does is 2 things. We think that it kind of steals some of the power away from kind of that active mind, right? Like you're kind of getting it out. It's kind of cathartic. But also, it also kind of schedules this time in your day that is devoted to that. So when you get to bed and your mind starts worrying, you say, no. I did this already. Like, we did this. We spent that 20 minutes, and I have it scheduled for tomorrow. I have this in my calendar. And that, getting into that kind of practice actually really is effective in kind of turning down the volume, right? Because sleep is really about letting go, right? We have to kind of trust and be safe and let our mind quiet, and this is just one of the tools to help that happen.
That's great. I'm going to ask each of you one more question,
Yeah.
and I'm going to turn it over to the audience. We have about 10 minutes to go. So, you know, we've all lived through 3 years of a global pandemic, something that we haven't lived through for obviously a very long time. Have you noticed any clear trends in your clinical practices that's drawn out beyond the kind of global worry, but are there particular symptom manifestations that you've seen in your practices,
Yeah.
either around stress or
Right.
sleep?
I'll let Aric answer that for his practice and what the hit on sleep. And I will just say the data, especially the population-based data, shows us that there is a latent epidemic that is blossoming, and that is the epidemic of depression and anxiety that has a buildup. We're not recovering from the pandemic. Vulnerable people, particularly youth and young adults and people of color, the rates of serious mental health problems and suicidality is going up, and it's this, if we don't really face the mental health residue of the intensity of these past few years, we, in a different way, not with medications and psychiatry, we don't have enough to go around, we are really in trouble. Particularly, we're just so worried for our youth. And the climate doom and hopelessness, it just completely adds to this. Vulnerable people now have added that to their depressive, hopeless view about the world.
Yeah. I mean, no surprise, sleep was harder during the pandemic. Our clinic, you know, it always has a long wait list, and that's how it is. But the nature of the kind of sleep problems that people had changed a little bit. So, you know, certainly if you know, survey data suggests that like many more people reported insomnia over that period of time. One thing that we noticed, and some of it's just kind of anecdotal, is that people were reporting kind of more kind of difficulties in kind of waking up in the early morning hours and not being able to get back to sleep. So like that 2 hours before you were supposed to get up, right? So like 4, 5, and that's really consistent with kind of the sleep-stress relationship. So as I mentioned, kind of our sleep kind of degrades throughout the night. Like it kind of like as we let that sleep balloon kind of give out its sleepiness, our sleep gets more fragmented and lighter, right? We don't have that deep sleep. We have more REM sleep. And so people wake up more just naturally. And so if you have that kind of stress, that kind of worries, you know, that we all kind of experienced, it just became more likely that if you woke up, it would just be harder to get back to sleep, right? Like kind of your brain would kick on. And so that happened. But the only other thing that was really interesting that happened is there was a segment of the population where their sleep improved, right? And a lot of that had to do with this move to work from home, right? People didn't have to commute. People didn't have to get up 2 hours earlier to take the bus to get to where they needed to be or get on the BART or what have you. And so they, for a short period of time, you know, gained this autonomy over their time, which was really important. And some of those people used it to sleep more or sleep better. Unfortunately, those benefits are kind of being whittled away in the way that people have, or you know, companies and what have you have kind of taken advantage of working from home, where people have like a 24-hour day now, right? And so those kind of constraints, or that expectation that you can kind of jump on a call, you know, after you get dinner for your kids becomes more commonplace, and that has a cost to sleep. So much so that people now have, you know, there's this idea of this kind of bedtime procrastination kind of phenomenon where people are kind of trying to take back their time to do things that they want to do, but it's at a cost of sleep, right? But it's the only time that they have for themselves. And so, you know, that's been kind of one of the observations.
Great, thank you. So questions from the audience? Yes. Are there mics, or we just speak up?
talk
We
really
can
loud.
we can repeat it.
We'll
probably.
repeat it.
So my question is, from a dental perspective at UC.
Hi, I'm a dentist, and UCSF under Dean Green taught us to be stomatologists and assess your patient as a patient, not just their teeth. We were taught to be interdisciplinary, which is why I'm here. So has your study of stress and sleep become part of a primary care physician's review? Because I'm constantly looking at airways and telling my patients, has your doctor talked to you about a sleep study? You have like a Malampati 3 or 4 airway, and I point to it. I literally have a picture that I can point to and say, and a lot of times the person says, no, I haven't. They haven't talked, and they've been to their physician, and the wife tells me, yeah, they stop breathing when they're sleeping. So, it's the red flag for me. So has that been part of medical school? Now, I mean, the students coming out saying, assess blood pressure, et cetera, all the obvious stuff, and also stress levels and sleep hygiene.
Yeah.
Is that part of the curriculum now, or?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to kind of nationally. The sleep education within medical curriculum is kind of impoverished. I mean, it's only a couple hours per of the 4 years of medical school in which it's devoted to kind of sleep medicine and sleep education. I mean, obviously, as you go on into different subdisciplines of like palm or dentistry or what have you, there's more. There has been a big push to try to get that kind of built into primary care, but I think it runs the risk of the solution being, oh, well, here's this prescription for a benzodiazepine or Ambien, and so the first line treatment for anybody that has insomnia is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBTI, but that's rarely done, and a lot of people don't know about that. So it's a challenge around kind of airway obstruction and kind of obstructive sleep apnea. My guess is that it's not common unless, like in our clinic, it's the spouse bringing them in and being like, dude, there's something wrong. Like, he's not breathing. And that's how we get it. Most people don't know. And that's the challenge. I think that as technology improves, kind of the golden ticket is like, can we use devices, wearable devices like an Apple Watch or something like that, to be able to detect these things early so that there's an opportunity to intervene?
Yeah. And I will say UCSF is way ahead. I give one of the wellness lectures, and we have a lot of focus in our curriculum on understanding stress, trauma, and lifestyle. And we tell them to assess stress as one of the vital signs. And we do it in the most simple way, so they'll use it, which is on a 1 through 10 scale, how much stress and worry are you feeling? And we could do an intense assessment by looking at the stressors, but of course that just takes too long. So getting the perceived stress is the quickest way to know, is there something to query and probe here? In other ways, on the medical chart, there's been a movement also through UCSF and Nancy Adler to look at the social determinants of health and ask things like if they're exposed to domestic violence and food insecurity.
So I see several hands, and we've only got a few minutes.
Sorry.
So
Yeah.
short questions, short answers. Here in the front, then there, and then back there. So in the front, please.
Thank you. I make my question really fast. I want to know what your thoughts are on using an Oura ring, because I am using it, and night after night I see not much deep sleep, and that is now giving me more anxiety and stress than anything.
Yeah.
So quick answer.
It's a phenomenon called orthosomnia, which is an insomnia that develops as a consequence of using wearable devices. And so, and it's particularly relevant in that these devices are almost, they're really, really close to being there and measuring how fragmented your sleep is and how much sleep you're getting total. But it's at the kind of the depth and kind of the architecture of sleep where it kind of falls off. And so, there's still, it's not a question of if devices will be able to do that, but kind of when they'll be able to do it well. And so I wouldn't read too much into it, but, we all have the.
I only look at the good nights. When I know I've gotten a bad night, I'm not going to check.
Exactly.
So we have one with a hand up, please, and then we'll go over to you. Yes.
2 questions for children, young children. What do you think of white noise machines and melatonin for kids?
Yeah, white noise machines, tend to be okay. I mean, there are understandably some concerns, but I don't think we understand that quite so well. Melatonin in kids in general have, it's safe and it has been shown to be fairly effective, particularly in kids. It's interesting, like as we age out of it, it becomes less effective in like unless you're trying to shift somebody's circadian phase. And so, just work with your doctor on it. Yeah.
When you live in a cold climate for most of the year, like Alaska, like I do you need a cold shower?
No, it's all about what's a stress for you. I think sauna for you would be great, repeatedly, 3 times a week. Hyperthermia, it's wonderful for depression and cardiovascular health.
Yeah, yeah. 0
Great.
minutes.
Well, I think we're at time. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did, and please join me in thanking our 2 guest speakers.
Thanks, Sam.